Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a trip back in time, way back,
Oh.
to the book of Exodus.
Exodus.
Yeah, chapter 22 to be exact.
Okay.
And, this is a set of laws and guidelines. And we were curious about, what it says about the people who wrote them, about their priorities, values, all that.
Right. I mean, these laws are our sole source today, really. Exodus chapter 22. And we're hoping to kind of tease out how they viewed property, responsibility to each other, and maybe even some early glimpses of what we might call today social justice.
Right. It's like a window into their world.
Yeah, absolutely. Trying to understand the core principles at play here, in their context.
So let's dive right in. This first section, verses 1 through 15, it's all about protecting property.
Okay.
And right off the bat, there's this interesting thing about livestock theft. If someone steals, say, an ox or a sheep, and then slaughters or sells it, the penalty is 5 oxen for an ox, 4 sheep for a sheep.
Right.
But if they just steal it and they're caught with the animal still alive, it's only double restitution. What do you think about that? It's kind of like a sliding scale. Why the difference,
Well, I think it probably reflects just how crucial livestock were to their economy. I mean, slaughtering or selling a stolen animal, that wasn't just about the animal itself. You're also taking away all its future potential, for breeding or milk or labor, things like that.
Yeah.
So it's a much bigger economic hit to the victim.
Yeah.
So, the harsher penalty seems designed to really ensure their long-term stability, not just, immediate replacement.
Right. It's about safeguarding the whole system.
Mhm.
Then there's this rule about breaking and entering. You kill a thief breaking in at night, no blood guilt,
Right.
but do it after sunrise, and it's a different story. It really highlights the different value they placed on human life versus property, depending on the time of day.
Yeah, that is really interesting. It makes you wonder, about their perception of threat. I mean, nighttime, it's dark, you can't see, you don't know the intruder's intentions.
Right, yeah. Scary.
Exactly. So the law kind of gives the homeowner the benefit of the doubt in that situation, especially if they feel their life is in danger. But during the day, well, there's an assumption that you can see better, assess the situation, maybe find a way to resolve it without taking a life.
So, it's almost like this implicit acknowledgement that a nighttime intrusion, it just inherently carries a higher level of risk and fear.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And it kind of shows how they tried to balance the preservation of life with the reality of these really intense, potentially dangerous situations.
Right, it's nuanced. And then we have this really, stark consequence for thieves who can't pay back what they stole.
Yeah.
They're sold to cover the debt. This really shows how tightly their legal system was tied to their social structure. What do you make of that?
Well, it points to a world where economic security was, I'd say, pretty precarious for a lot of people. The fact that you could lose your freedom, become someone's property, just because you couldn't repay a debt, even one incurred through theft, it underscores just how central property rights were to their society.
Yeah, it's a huge consequence.
It is. And it exposes, I think, the potential vulnerability of those who didn't have the means to protect themselves financially.
Moving on, we have rules about livestock grazing and fire damage. If your animals graze in someone else's field, or if you start a fire that spreads and causes damage, you're held responsible.
Right.
What's it saying about their ideas of community?
Well, there's a clear emphasis on individual responsibility. I mean, think about it. Stray livestock or a fire spreading out of control, those could have serious consequences for your neighbors, for the entire community.
Right, yeah. You could wipe people out.
Exactly. And so these regulations, they're kind of like a legal mechanism to ensure that whoever caused the harm, well, they also bear the financial burden. They have to make things right.
It's about keeping the community stable and whole. Now, things get really interesting when they talk about safekeeping goods.
Yeah.
If someone entrusts you with, say, silver or other valuables, and those items are stolen from your house, there are these different rules.
Right.
If they catch the thief pays double. But if they don't catch the thief, the person who is entrusted with the goods has to go before the judges and swear an oath before the Lord. The idea of an oath carrying so much weight, legally speaking, is pretty fascinating.
Yeah, it's like when there's no physical evidence, no clear-cut proof, they turn to something more, spiritual, I guess. It shows how religion was woven into their legal system.
Right. It's almost like divine arbitration.
Yeah, and it really relied on the idea that people would be too afraid to lie under oath, fearing divine punishment. It was like a powerful statement of innocence, a matter of personal integrity and their relationship with God.
And it's really interesting how detailed the rules are when it comes to borrowed animals. If a borrowed animal is injured or dies, who's responsible depends on whether the owner was present when it was borrowed,
Right.
or if the animal was hired out for work. These are pretty specific scenarios.
Yeah, and it shows how they really tried to consider the different circumstances of each situation, the nuances of the agreement. Like, if the owner is there, maybe they're sharing the risk, right? But if the animal's hired out, there's this financial transaction. Maybe that implies a transfer of responsibility for the animal's well-being during that time.
It's like a proto-contract law.
And the fact that the higher price seems to also cover potential loss, well, that suggests a pretty sophisticated understanding of risk and liability. You know, they're thinking about the different types of agreements people make.
Okay, let's move to the second part of Exodus 22, starting with verse 16. This is where it really shifts toward, I'd say, social responsibility, broader societal concerns.
Right.
And the first rule we encounter deals with the seduction of an unpledged virgin. The man is required to pay the bride price and marry her, unless her father refuses. But even if the father says no to the marriage, the man still has to pay the bride price.
Yeah.
What does this tell us about their views on marriage, on the role of women?
Well, it's interesting. It suggests that even if a sexual relationship wasn't, formalized beforehand, a woman's potential for marriage, her social standing, it was still protected under the law.
Okay.
The bride price, whether or not the marriage happened, served as a form of compensation,
Right.
Acknowledging the impact this situation might have on her future prospects.
Right. It's like they're recognizing a harm,
Right.
but the father's right to refuse. That's really interesting, too.
It is, because it really underscores that this was still a patriarchal society, where fathers held considerable power over their daughters' lives, especially when it came to marriage. And of course, the bride price itself, it wasn't just a simple transaction.
Right.
It represented this whole network of social and economic ties between families, solidifying the new bond created through marriage.
So it's like, yeah, a financial transaction, but also a deeply symbolic one.
Yeah.
And then we have these very blunt prohibitions. You shall not permit a sorceress to live, and whoever lies with an animal shall surely be put to death.
Right.
These really make you think about their beliefs, about what they considered taboo.
Absolutely. These are strong statements about what they saw as threats to their spiritual and social order, the idea of sorcery that probably tapped into deep-seated fears of harmful magic, things that could disrupt the community, bring chaos.
Right. It's about maintaining control, stability.
And bestiality, well, that would have been seen as this total violation of the natural order, crossing boundaries that shouldn't be crossed. It might have been connected to ideas of purity, religious defilement. I mean, it's hard to say for sure, but it was clearly a huge taboo.
And then immediately following those prohibitions, there's this very clear declaration of religious exclusivity. Whoever sacrifices to any god, except the Lord alone, shall be devoted to destruction. This is monotheism, front and center.
It is, and it really highlights the idea of a singular, all-powerful God at the heart of their belief system. This isn't just a suggestion, it's a command. And the punishment, well, it emphasizes just how seriously they took their exclusive relationship with this one God.
Right. No room for other deities. And now we come to a section that feels, surprisingly relevant today.
Yeah.
The text really emphasizes protecting the vulnerable,
Okay.
specifically foreigners, widows, and orphans. And they even connect this ethical obligation to their own history.
Yeah.
You shall not wrong or oppress a resident alien, for you were aliens in the land of Egypt.
Right. Powerful stuff.
Why do you think they invoke this specific historical experience?
Well, it's about fostering empathy. I mean, imagine being told, remember what it felt like to be powerless and mistreated in a foreign land. Don't do that to others who are now strangers in your midst.
Right.
It's a direct link between their own past suffering and their present moral obligations.
And it's not just, be nice. There are clear warnings about divine retribution if these groups are mistreated. God says, my anger will blaze forth and I will kill you with the sword. Your wives shall become widows and your children fatherless.
Right. It's not messing around. It shows that mistreating the vulnerable was not just, a social faux pas. It was a direct offense against God, with very real, very serious consequences.
Following this, we have rules about lending to the poor. And here, they specifically prohibit charging interest. To give this very concrete example.
Yeah.
You have to return a cloak taken as collateral by nightfall because it's the person's only covering.
Okay.
This speaks volumes about their sense of compassion, doesn't it?
It does. It's like they were trying to create this more equitable society by preventing the exploitation of those who were struggling financially. The ban on interest for the poor, the rule about returning essential items, it was like a basic safety net.
Right. It's about ensuring basic human dignity. Then we get these commands to respect authority, both divine and earthly. You shall not revile God, nor curse a ruler of your people.
Right. It's all about upholding the established order, both religious and social. Reviling God, that would have been seen as the ultimate act of defiance. And cursing a ruler, well, that could undermine their authority, create instability. It's about respect, deference to those in power.
After that, we have regulations about offerings, specifically the first fruits of the harvest and the firstborn of sons and livestock.
Yes. And the importance of timing, doing things the right way.
What was the significance of these offerings?
Well, it's all about acknowledging God's provision, recognizing that everything ultimately belongs to Him. The firstborn offering, that was especially significant. It was a way of dedicating the first and best to God. And those specific instructions about timing, about making sure offerings were complete and done properly, well, that ensured their religious institutions were supported, that the rituals continued.
So it was about maintaining that connection with the divine. And finally, we have this rule about not eating the meat of animals torn by wild beasts. And the text connects this to the idea of being a holy people.
Yeah.
How do you see all these seemingly disparate rules coming together under this concept of holiness?
Well, it seems like holiness, for them, it encompassed all these different facets of life. There's the ethical behavior towards others, the adherence to religious practices, and even, dietary choices.
So it's about living a life that's set apart, dedicated to God. So for you listening, this deep dive into Exodus 22, it really paints this picture of a society preoccupied with establishing order. It shows how they valued property rights and how much emphasis they placed on communal responsibility, taking care of each other. It's amazing the level of detail in these laws, covering everything from the specifics of stealing livestock to the ethics of lending money to someone in need.
What I find really thought-provoking is how these ancient laws, they kind of force us to confront the evolution of our own legal and ethical systems. Sure, some of their specific punishments or social customs, they might seem, totally foreign to us today, but those core principles of fairness, accountability, that focus on protecting the vulnerable, those ideas resonate across time.
And here's a final thought to leave you with. Think about those ancient rules, particularly the ones about protecting the vulnerable, about placing limits on how you can treat the poor, especially when it comes to lending and debt. Do any of those feel surprisingly relevant today?
Or maybe strikingly different.
Exactly. How much has really changed in the way we approach justice and community? This is just the start of a really fascinating conversation. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.